Welcome back to Inside Politics. Our guest today, Dr. John Viola, Middle Tennessee State University. We're talking about the still evolving selection of who's going to be the next president of the United States, although right now indications are it's going to be Democrat Joe Biden. Dr. Viola, if Joe Biden wins, it seems like he's carried, he's sort of rebuilt the Democratic wall in the Midwest. How was he able to do that? What made him different from Hillary Clinton? Was it because he campaigned more up there, paid more attention to him? Or was it because both there probably and across the country, Joe Biden was just more popular than Hillary Clinton? And that seemed to make a big difference in the factor across the country with Biden's numbers staying high throughout the race.
There are a couple of factors, and you've identified most of them. He did campaign there, and you know, although the national polls, I mean, they got it right, but they got the margins wrong. But it seems like the candidates' polls must have been better because they were in the states that they needed constantly in those last couple of days, you know, with Biden practically, you know, moving his residence there in the last couple of weeks. You know, one of the things you saw with Hillary Clinton is she had very high negatives. And frankly, one of the things that you see with Donald Trump is that he had very high negatives. You know, he tried to run again as an outsider, but that's harder to claim when you've been president for 4 years and people rely not just on their hopes, but on what they've already seen and maybe the fears of what they've already seen, particularly compounded by the COVID virus.
Social media continues to be a source of, even now, some significant amount of misinformation on some of the platforms like TikTok. The social media owners seem to be doing a better job of policing that, marking incorrect postings, those sorts of things. But is social media and being an informed consumer of information just part of the American political scene, and people just have to get better about understanding when they read stuff that doesn't mean that what they're seeing is correct?
You know, as a scholar, we always try to separate out anecdotes, which are sometimes true, from, you know, genuine statistics and genuine trends. And you know, when you have 150 million or so people voting, you're always going to find a problem somewhere, and maybe, you know, or a perception of a problem somewhere. But that is not a statistical trend. And as you know, as far as I can tell, the election has been carried out in a very professional manner. There have been poll watchers. There have been individuals watching as the votes were counted. You know, if mistakes have been made, surely they need to be corrected. But I don't think he's going to find a lot of pay dirt there.
There's a lot of talk about impact of foreign interference and misinformation. That seems to either not have happened, although there's been some talk that our national security officials might have done a preemptive strike on some of those sources to keep them from being able to do that. I'm sure they still need to be diligent, but what happened, that didn't seem to be as big a deal. Are we also better informed consumers about that to see that some of the stuff that went up there, if you check out the sources of it, you can pretty well figure out this is not really the truth?
Well, the irony is some of the misinformation, you know, Trump is pretty good or bad, depending on how you want to interpret it, of seeing something, you know, online somewhere and saying, I've seen this, without necessarily, you know, I'm not sure if it's true or not, but let's put it out there. Whereas, you know, what you ought to be doing is just don't put it out there unless you're able to verify it or have, you know, some confidence that it's true.
What happened with the polls? I mean, they did get the winner right this time, it appears. They got the margins all wrong. They seem to be wrong, particularly about Donald Trump. They were wrong about him in 2016, and they were wrong underestimating him again. In 2018, yes. During the mid-year elections, they were pretty much on balance with what was going to happen in Congress. This year, they were way off again. Is this a problem with the polls, or just something a little bit unusual because Donald Trump is such an unusual candidate and president?
I'm not sure. One of the things that's happened is apparently both candidates had more people come out for them than was expected. So part of the fact that Biden got more voters out was counterbalanced by the fact that so did Trump. And you actually had some people who didn't vote in the last election who are voting for Trump, you know, in this election. So that's probably part of it. The other thing I think is, you know, we're dealing with a period. Usually, with a poll, you're most concerned with the period right on election day. and we've had so many early voting and absentee votes that you're trying to measure over an entire month. Although again, most of this time, Biden has been projected ahead as about 8 to 10%, and it looks like his victory is going to be closer to 2 to 4%.
The other question about that, in some ways, it looked so bleak for Joe Biden on the Tuesday night of the election, but then things got better. Wasn't that sort of also, even though the media pollsters were often wrong, they did often say that we might well see on election night, because President Trump wanted all his people to vote day of, that we'd see the president looking like he was far ahead and going to win, but that Joe Biden might see a blue shift back to him because the mail-in votes were going to be counted second, and we'd see the vote coming back to him. And that's exactly what happened. So while the polls were wrong, the media did seem to get at least that part of the campaign right.
And the one exception is probably Florida. And that was because Florida had made a conscious decision. Their legislature had voted to count the votes as they came in rather than holding them for Election Day.
Dr. John Viles, our guest on Inside Politics. We're talking about what's going to happen in the presidential race. It looks like it's headed towards Joe Biden. It's not been called yet. Back to continue our conversation with the doctor after this break.